Okay, we'll call the Tuesday, March 19th, 2024 Select Board meeting to order. First on the agenda is the warrant 2419 and Facilities Project 35.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Warrant 2419 dated March 21st, 2024, totals in $797,000 on the payroll side of things. On the bills payable side, you'll see $1,376,115. A couple things of note there. Some training and education and the purchase of books on the library side of things, totaling in roughly $18,000, as well as some museum passes. Also, the insurance premium for the schools, a little over $200,000, and the North Shore Tech Assessment coming in at $220,928, rounding that off. On the facility project side of things, a slightly smaller bill. I wouldn't get too used to those. They're gonna get a little bigger, but $15,495 was just the small amount needed to get us over the hump to 100% completion with context architecture for the purposes of bidding, as well as GPI, who's doing some traffic engineering for us and some early MassDOT coordination.
Any questions?
Quick question, I assume North Shore Tech is a quarterly?
Yes.
Anything
So
else?
all of our schools quarterly now? North Shore and is Masco
don't know
still?
the
So it's monthly.
Oh, it is monthly?
No, quarterly.
Quarterly?
Yeah.
And there was a discussion about going to monthly, but then it was decided that the cash flow at Masco was sufficient. And
Okay.
the only thing they did was define the date where that quarterly payment was due, which
Oh,
is,
thank you.
Okay. Okay.
Anything else? Questions?
I guess we got,
I do
what's
not.
cafe at the school? What is the cafe? Is it cafeteria with,
Yeah, I assume cafeteria.
I can ask them.
just,
I'll shoot you all an email. and
Just curious.
We'll see what it is. Yeah.
thanks.
Is there a motion to approve?
move to accept as presented.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you. Next, we have Town Administrator update and report.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I wanted to make note that Officer Tommy McParlin had announced his retirement after 30 years of service to the town of Middleton, so I just wanted to take a minute to thank him really quick for his dedication and service to the town. The Middleton School Committee met yesterday, the 18th, and they've communicated their budget expectations to us. It's a fairly firm number, so at this time, they're looking at roughly $375,000 over our 4% guidance. That would more than likely come in the form of an override, so
So what is their total percentage?
I don't have what that would be. Quick math.
So it's just under 8%. No, about 6%.
One of the things I'd like to explore having a conversation with them about going forward is, I don't think we can wait until right near April 1st or very late in March for timeline of when the school committee actually makes their final determination up. You know, 3 different schools I get in the Tri-Town region, or 3 different communities in the Tri-Town Union region, but given that our schedule is pretty set on first Saturday in February and first Saturday in March, I think we really need to speak to the elementary school leadership about they need to tighten up their timeline next year.
Yeah.
I mean, because quite honestly, every other department in the town is on a much different time, and they're a department of the town.
Yep. And I think that, the budget process is difficult enough as it is, especially this time of year, waiting for those last second things to come crashing in. So if it's one more large figure that we can button up a month sooner, it would be helpful. So I'll pass that on if the board.
We did talk to them at the Capitol about that, too. It was
Yeah, but
mentioned.
I think it just has to be abundantly clear that we expect it by a certain date. And if it's not by a certain date, then we'll carry the guidance that they've given, and we can deal with it otherwise.
Is there consensus that you'd like me to reiterate that?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Thanks.
Yep. I joined my counterparts from Boxford and Topsfield for a meeting with the Masco administration, just to get all of our heads in the same room to talk about what would some of these, the financial end of some of these capital projects they're talking about, how it would actually look and how we end up actually doing it. So it was a helpful conversation. Thank you to Dr. Harvey for hosting. Police negotiations are ongoing. We're hoping to wrap them up, fingers crossed, tomorrow. As you all know, they're the last outstanding bargaining unit in advance of the upcoming annual town meeting, so we'd really like to get that wrapped up. But it's been good, and the relationship has been good, so we thank them. We've officially submitted $60,000 in CPA requests for library repairs, officially, super officially, so thank you to Costa for helping me coordinate that. Our finance team met with Hilltop to discuss the logistics of borrowing for the Fuller Meadow roof. We also talked a little bit about the Masco piece. It's interesting because Hilltop represents Middleton and Boxford, as well as the Masco School District, but they don't represent Topsfield, so it's kind of an extra added layer there. You'll note in the warrant when we get to it later, we still have placeholder language in there. We did learn from Hilltop that while we can lay the groundwork for the Fuller Meadow roof, which we're still waiting for the figures from them on that, Masco, they actually will only talk with Masco about, and then we have to wait for Masco to hand it on to us, so there's still a placeholder there. And there'll certainly be a follow-up. There's currently a vacancy on the North Shore Transportation Task Force. That position was previously held by our town planner. It can be held by any resident or town employee in Middleton. There is an MBTA component to that. And so, Mr. Chair, if it's agreeable, perhaps we can solicit interest and bring any interested applicants forward at an upcoming meeting.
Yeah, maybe we can, on the website or however, we can kind of explain a little bit of what the charge of that committee is and what they do. I think we really need an advocate. I'd love to see a citizen at large, but it's something that we really need someone passionate about, maybe getting some buses here or getting something from the MBTA for Middleton. So I'm hoping that we can really find
Is this
someone that would.
basically the former MBTA advisory committee?
Yeah.
I don't know what its former name was, and I don't have the history on it. Do you think maybe that's,
Yeah, because what happened before, because we didn't really care that we were an MBTA community because there were no ramifications to us, but now that we have,
Oh, there was a ramification.
But not as
We-
much.
Well, no,
Yeah.
you'd be surprised what
Right.
we pay every year in our,
Right.
on our
Cherry sheet?
cherry sheet.
right, but
Thank
there's
you.
bigger ramifications now. So I think it's time that we get someone in that position that's really an advocate for the town to get something for the money Brian just alluded to and for the other regulations. So for anyone listening, we really need someone that wants to be an advocate to get some public transportation to Middleton.
excellent, so we'll get that up on the website and we'll bring something back. We had a productive meeting later last week with the engineers that we've been working with on the bottleneck reduction grant. So as you may recall, we succeeded in receiving the grant for the design phase of that. Additionally, we've received the green light up to $500,000 for infrastructure improvements. And so where we're at this point, based on the meeting from last week, the engineers are going to bring forward 2 or 3 different options. We'll review them at a select board meeting in April, and we encourage the public to come and participate. I know that folks in that neighborhood have been pretty active and persistent about improvements in that neighborhood, so I think they'll be happy about what they see. As I had expressed over the summer, these type of things, especially when you're working in a grant cycle, move at their own pace. As frustrating as it can be, we can't really snap our fingers sometimes on these things, but I am happy to report what we are expecting after we get feedback in April is that we should finish the design phase through the spring with the intent of construction this summer, in advance of school starting up. So it's about what we predicted last summer. So we thank the residents for their continued patience, and we'll be sure to communicate a future select board meeting date when we do bring some designs forward, because we do want their input. Thank you to the select board and members of the public that participated in the visioning session for the Memorial Hall parcel with Mass Development. Thank you to Jackie for coordinating it. It was a crucial first step. And I will note additional public input will be sought over the coming months from the public in the form of a survey and other sessions. So we encourage residents that are interested to come out and give us their thoughts on it.
May I announce those dates?
Yes.
Those were finalized late
Awesome.
breaking today. So for residents that would like to participate, as well as any board members, the online survey will launch on April 1st. And also on April 1st, there will be a virtual online input session at 11 a.m. to noon. And then the following Monday, on April 8th, in the evening at 6 p.m. at the Flint Public Library, will be the in-person input session. And letters are going to the abutters. We did the 500-foot abutter list for Memorial Hall and the abutting parcel, and those will be going out in the mail on Thursday to let all of those folks know about the virtual session on the 1st, the in-person session on the 8th, and the survey.
For those watching that just didn't catch it, so this is to help in the decision-making to what happens to Memorial Hall once everybody moves out. It's just specific to that building, but it's for ideas of what the citizens of Middleton would like to see on that property, with or without that building.
And that'll be on our website as well. It just was very late today that it came in, so it'll be up tomorrow. Thank you.
Thank you. And then lastly, a huge thank you to our town clerk and assistant town clerk, as well as volunteers and employees for all of their efforts going into the recount that will occur this upcoming Thursday. It was a lot of extra work, so thank you.
A lot of extra work.
So, as these, party primaries are designed to determine the party nominee, why aren't the parties paying for the cost of the primary?
Because under Mass General Law, any party that is deemed by the Secretary of State to be a party in good standing in Massachusetts, and it's either based on number of registered voters in that party or a process of being recognized as a party. All primary nominations, including for president, for state offices, as well as party committees, are managed by a state elections structure. So some states, because what you're talking about is like Democratic State Committee, Republican State Committee, Libertarian State Committee. Some states, those are actually done by the respective committees, but in Massachusetts, because the way the law is on the creation and designation by the Secretary of State, it's an election that's managed by the state in the municipal structure. And I get what you mean. Here's a perfect example of, a recount on a party structure, not a nominee for president or a nominee for a state legislature or a nominee for a county position. Because we bear the cost for that.
Yeah.
Any questions for Justin by any board members?
I do not.
No? Okay, we'll move on. We have some minutes to approve. We have the March 5th open session and March 5th executive session. Has everybody had a chance to read them?
I did.
Mr. Chairman, I move that we approve both the open session and the executive session from March 5th, 2024.
I'll
Even though this says 2025, somebody's getting way ahead of themselves.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, any public comment? No.
Another update.
Yep. Now we have an update on 49 South Main Street and 10 and 18 Boston Street, the Village project.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So before you, there's a hard copy. We have been discussing at length the proposed project going over there and at the corner of 114 in Boston. There's a printout of the proposed easement that will show the dedicated turning lane that we've discussed at length. This is an important component of the ongoing development agreement negotiation that this board will be going into executive session on later this evening because it does involve real estate and some financial numbers, so we don't want to necessarily tip our hand as it is an active negotiation, but this was a large component of it. So Mr. Onyem has committed to donating the blue cross-hatched portion of land this is something that will be attached to the development agreement. I know it was a big concern when I first got here over the summer, and frequently expressed by this board, that if this project were to move forward, what does that mean in terms of traffic impact? And so one component of that was this dedicated turn going from Boston onto 114 along the corner there. The other component is we're continually working together for a MassWorks grant or Housing Works grant that would be anywhere from $250 up to, or excuse me, I keep doing that, $2.5 million to $5 million, depending on the needs from an infrastructure perspective. And so having this type of commitment from the developer does count as a match towards that. And it's really kind of helps sweeten the pot a little bit with the state when we put together a competitive application.
So as I look at this map right now, and I'm looking at the Boston Street component, the dark shaded areas lines are the current right-of-way.
Correct.
The shadowed areas on the inside is the current roadway pavement to pavement.
Correct.
So what would be kind of helpful to see here, and I don't expect there to be doing it, but if we have some maps that show what it looks like further down here on 114 and across the street, because I'd really like to see what now is there for width and ability of turning lanes. Now, obviously, this accomplishes what we need for space in terms of having a dedicated lane that goes right and obviously a dedicated lane that goes left that already exists now, because you can only go left or right, or I guess straight across to Memorial Hall. But I'd like to see if in the future there's room down here. If not, I'd like to continue in the future discussions with ways that we would be able to have enough space on, because the problem is across the street, you've got the front of Memorial Hall. Next to that is the burial ground, where there's no way to give up space there because we'd lose a sidewalk, and we're surely not going into the burial ground. But I'd kind of like at some point, doesn't have to be now, but some point in the future, kind of see what this looks like in terms of.
Sure. So, so for the purposes of the easement and actually filing something, that's what this intends to satisfy.
Yes.
I think as we move down the road in the coming months, we'll more than likely be working with TEC to do the early level design to show, how, exactly what you just described, how things would kind of interact with Memorial Hall across the street, with the post office on the other corner. They have taken into account with this easement that they'll be able to lane shift without having to take any property on the post office side, because it would require a rather complicated and cumbersome easement, but you also wouldn't have to lean into the inhabitants of the across the street on the other side.
And I would expect, as part of any ZBA approval for the front piece of this property, there'll be sidewalk requirements that'll be built into that, both on 114 and on the Boston Street side. So it's, the easement area is not going to be a sidewalk area. The sidewalk area would be adjacent to the easement area.
Correct. So, and I would say it's not going to follow that line exactly. What they've talked about at an early level is some type of multimodal transportation path to, because, you're dealing with MassDOT, and MassDOT really likes bike lanes. This would take away that bike lane requirement, and it would pull it out of the road and onto a wider, maybe 10-foot wide sidewalk that would cut, softly through that corner.
Okay,
So it's just something to keep an eye out for.
okay.
So the sidewalk would go outside of the easement, inside of the easement?
Potentially.
So who would own the
components of it.
sidewalk?
I mean, if it's within our right-of-way beyond that easement.
I don't think we have a right-of-way beyond, this easement is the right-of-way we're gonna get. I don't think we have any right-of-way further in the property, so if the sidewalk were to go in, not interfere with the easement, because we need that to widen the road and go here,
Right.
then who's gonna own that sidewalk?
So the point where I think it would most come into play is really at the corner itself, where it may kind of softly cut across that corner. But it's a good question, and I'll ask, you know, how that would work out.
Maybe, oh, go ahead, I'm sorry.
No, sorry, go ahead, Jeff.
Maybe a wider easement to include that the sidewalk be on part of land that's an easement, because I think the town wants to own the sidewalk on
Well,
114.
I'm not so concerned about owning the sidewalk, I'm more concerned about ensuring that there's enough space here to accomplish the turning lanes, but also, you know, when sidewalks are required by the ZBA for projects, they're not necessarily on right-of-way property. Sometimes the sidewalks are required to be on the property itself. It depends on what the layout is. I mean, I'm
But usually
thinking-
on South Main Street,
Yeah, but
It's a little
not,
different than-
but I'm thinking of other areas, not necessarily. So
Right.
if you could just run that by either council or whomever it is, just to ensure that, because what is really key here, this is, you know, approval of this, both by town meeting and through the overall project. This is going to be a generational opportunity to actually make a big effectual change in this intersection. And I don't want to see it get hung up or limited by either sidewalk or right-of-way limits.
And at this point in time, it's in part dictated by what happens on the commercial component of this, which is together but separate from the
And the commercial
residential.
component is from this black line forward, right?
Correct.
Yeah. So there's a little bit of it that's happening on the non-commercial piece, well, what will be the residential piece, but the bigger issue is on the front.
Right. And I think that's a little up in the air right
Yeah.
now.
Okay.
But
Has
we'll
that been
ask.
filed with the ZBA?
As of 2 weeks ago, has it been about 2
Thought he
weeks?
did it
Yeah.
2 weeks ago.
Okay.
And it looks pretty all right, but there's always room for improvement. So.
Yep.
Any other questions about that piece? Okay, so we'll pick up the rest of it. Attorney Tellerman is going to join us this evening sometime around 7:45, 8 o'clock. That's everything for now.
Okay, we'll move on. We have to vote to add an additional manager, Amelia.
Did you ask for the public comments?
Yeah, I did it before
Okay.
that. Amelia Cadello to the current precious metals license at Cash for Gold at 185 South Main Street. Is anybody here representing them? No? Do we want to discuss it, or without them here?
It's just adding a second manager onto the license. It's a
So this
pretty-
isn't a manager replacement?
No, this is a secondary manager.
And is the
So Bill
reason
Sacchetti
for
would
that,
still-
is the reason for that
This is
an
slow.
individual that is a licensed manager has to be on site at all times, or?
They just, for whatever reason, for their business, would like to have a second manager
Okay.
on the license. They don't have to provide any more than that to us.
Were they advised to be here or not?
We had advised them, but it's a pretty standard housekeeping matter. So we encourage everyone to come to the meetings. I mean, the license, it's not a new license, it's not something that's been in existence for a while. Bill Sacchetti, who's the current on-site manager, would remain. It's just adding, his partner to the business license.
Pretty standard.
Yeah, I'm okay as proposed. So, Mr. Chairman, I move that we approve the addition of a second manager, Amelia J. Cardillo, to the current precious metals license for cash for gold located at 185 South Main Street.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay. We're gonna vote on
Public
two,
comment?
what's that?
Did we do public?
Yeah, I did.
Oh. I missed it.
Not out of order, but we did it.
Okay.
We're gonna vote on 2 seasonal license renewals, alcohol, common victular, and entertainment for the Ferncroft Country Club at the Halfway House and Members Lounge on Village Road. Manager, Ian Crooks. Is anyone here from Ferncroft? No? Okay.
Is this an actual renewal, or does this have to be a new license every year?
This is a standard renewal for seasonals.
Okay.
Same as the February license renewals for the annuals.
Anyone have any comments on it at all, or issues?
Nope.
Is there a motion?
And all required pieces have been completed for this? Okay.
Yeah, I do want to thank Mr. Crooks. He's been there for about a year or so now. But I can say that both Deb and I found him to be top tier in turning his paperwork in on time and properly. So we thank him for that.
Maybe he can give a tutorial to some of our other license holders that are not so good at submitting them on time.
We could ask.
Is there a motion to approve?
Mr. Chairman, I move that we approve 2 seasonal license renewals, which is an alcohol, common victular, and entertainment for the Ferncroft Country Club Halfway House and the Ferncroft Country Club Members Lounge located at 8 to 10 Village Road with manager of record of Ian Crooks.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, we have a proposal from Middleton Light for a generator at the municipal complex to be built. I think we have some paper, plan of it, I think, here, too.
Yeah, looks like this.
Yes, thanks for having me. Mike Whittier, the manager of the light department. The idea to put a generator at the town complex, I first had conversations with Jackie last year about doing a generator, an energy park down there. You might have remembered some of that conversation, but the idea was so that we could provide generation for the full complex down there, the entire campus. Jackie said that she figured she's going to try to get grants for it. She wasn't successful, so when I reached back out, it kind of reinvigorated the idea to put a generator down there. It would be much bigger than is needed, but it would pick up the entire complex. You could charge electric vehicles, you could make coffee, turn the microwave on, whatever you want to do. Every single outlet would be lit just like the city power was on. What we're also trying to do, we're pursuing grants or maybe even local funding to create what's called an island or a microgrid, and be able to pick up all the way down South Main Street to unlock our solar field and the battery project that we have down there. What that would do is, in an extended outage, it would allow that island, so to speak, to have energy, to have power during a long-term outage. That's part of the impetus for us to go forward with the grants, and it provides a better service to our customers as well. So the idea is we would pay for the generator, we'd pay for your backup generators that you're getting, so that we wouldn't delay the project at all. And then what that would allow us to do, not only would it be used for the microgrid and emergency power for the campus, we would also what's called peak shave, which would allow us to save money, and that would be quote-unquote a revenue source for us to be able to site the generator down there.
So how many hours a month, if there were no power outage, no emergency, in a normal month, how many hours a month would this generator be running?
So the market is designed so that once a month on the regional peak, actually it's more of a localized peak, not just Middleton, but there's Nema, Mass, Boston. That 1 hour per month sets our transmission fee for the month. So we try to capture that. So it could be anywhere between 3 to 6 or 7 events a month, and each would last 2 to 3 to 4 hours.
And what about noise from it?
The noise is minimal. We've Chairman Twist, myself, or Chief Twist, and Andy Sheehan visited the exact unit that we'd like to site down there in Littleton. They have 2 that are up and running side by side. The noise is 60 decibels at 50 feet, and as you get further away, it goes down quite a bit. In order to get to that low sound level, it's very expensive, but it's doable. The generator salesman actually told us that large generator would probably be quieter than the much smaller diesel generators that are going to be sited there. Not that it matters, because they shouldn't be running at the same time.
So how is this different from the peak station that was proposed about 10, 12 years ago down
Carpenter's Pond.
down the Sharpness Pond area.
It's a factor of about 20, 25 times smaller.
Smaller.
Yeah, exactly. This would not be dispatchable. That one was going to be dispatchable by ISO New England, so it would be called to run, at certain times. That, I believe it was between 100 and 110 megawatts. This one's 2.5 megawatts.
Okay.
Much smaller. It sits on a footprint in your
So-
package.
So I'm looking at the drawings of this, and what would be helpful to understand is I'm looking at the height of the entire unit. It says 437.9. I'm
Yeah,
assuming
that's all in inches.
Yeah,
So-
okay, that was gonna be, I
Yeah.
know it's not 437
Right.
feet, I surely know that, but I didn't know if that was an elevation setting or if that was,
No, I believe the diagram you have might have millimeters or centimeters as well as inches. I wouldn't be able to read that without my glasses, but thank you. I can tell you the stack is, I believe it's 37 feet, and then the bulk of the rest of the structure is 24 feet.
Would it be visible from anybody's home?
Yes, I believe there's a couple of homes that border the golf course that could see it, but at the same time, there's also some trees that are gonna stay. So where we thought it might go, the design team is looking at other spots, so I can't say for sure. But there are trees that are gonna stay, that are gonna actually help shield it. We'd plant, a green fence around it as well, arborvitae's, which would also help with the little bit of sound that it might put out.
where potentially is this looking to be located on the site? So I assume this is gonna be behind either the public safety building or behind, probably the public safety building, is what I'm assuming.
Right now, and I can't say for certainty, that's what we looked at when we first picked out, because there's an additional or an auxiliary parking area that may not be built now, and that would line up pretty well for that. But again, it's really up to the design team to take a look at that and see what they want to do with it.
Yeah, I noticed that. I think we'd like to stay away from, potential parking. I mean, I don't know how much trouble is it, cause us later when we do have to add that parking lot that really we could have used, but we cut it out just for cost. So.
One component I had asked in an early meeting was what's the expected life of this item? And that's something to consider too, is that maybe you're not handcuffing yourself as much if, the life of this thing is 15 or 20 years, and at that point in time, you want to revisit and say, all right, we don't want to renew the agreement or whatever, and you could put parking there.
I think,
What's the fuel?
Natural gas. So I'm going to use the old moniker of, because this is one of the things that people in Middleton are really, really lucky. I mean, I've been here since 2006. My electricity, other than once or twice, it's gone out for like literally a minute. It went out once. What I thought was 2 hours, I was upstairs showering with a lantern. Only when I came downstairs did I realize my rest of the family was with electricity. I just had my light switch off after the power came on. But that was literally one period for an hour. So the thing that's great about living in this town is when power does go out, Meld is on the scene sometimes before we even know the power's gone out. So my concern was originally, are we going to have a backup power at this facility? Because it's, obviously, we're going to need, because we've got public safety there. But the likelihood of needing it in other towns, like if this was Boxford, they need it just to keep the lights on regularly. So I appreciate the opportunity to actually have backup power for both buildings, and more so the public safety facility, 24/7 regardless. My big concern is sound, and because this would be actually abutting the densest housing complex or housing area for density in the entire town. It's the smallest lot size, I mean, not abutting, but would be nearby. So I'm more concerned about sound than I am really sight, because I think between green space, trees, and others, that can be addressed. It's really the sound issue that, and I don't know what 60 decibels means.
Yeah, so I can say that those of us in attendance of that demonstration in Littleton were pleasantly surprised how quiet it actually was. And like I said, A lot of money will be spent to get it that quiet. I could talk to the management down at Littleton Light again, and if you'd like to hear what it sounds like. And again, we were literally 10, 15 feet away from it, and it was still pretty quiet. We had a conversation like we are right now, we could hear perfectly fine. If you walk 300 or 400 feet away, like where the houses are gonna be, I'm not even sure you could hear it at all.
I would offer by comparison, a highway at 50 feet, I think is 70 or 80 decibels.
So this doesn't replace a diesel.
No,
Too bad, because at that point, the sound doesn't really concern me, because the diesel ones, when they have to come on, that's,
yeah, that's,
Was
it's
it loud?
gonna be loud.
right.
The alternate fuel source.
Yeah, you need a diesel for the alternative fuel source. We're looking at right now too, as far as switching scheme. Well, for the emergency shelter, it's an FPA at 110.
Public safety.
For the public safety building. So you're gonna, I believe they require to have 72 hours of fuel on site. So you can't do that with natural gas, right? The theory is you'll never run out.
We have that now? Oh, no, but must go per size of the building?
Yeah, a generator.
okay,
currently.
yeah.
Firehouse has that, has
Yeah, yeah.
diesel, yeah.
So we would still need a diesel generator on site.
Which that noise is,
But, so again, this is very early because we kind of dropped it last year and then I picked it back up pretty recently, but this generator should be able to kick on. I can't confirm it, but it should be, it's a fast start generator, so it should be able to kick on quickly enough where we won't need the diesel. The diesel will be a backup to the backup. But we're exploring that option, or if we just let the diesels kick on for a couple of minutes and then, because as soon as, this will hook onto the primary voltage system, not the secondary. That's why we can pick up both buildings in the campus as well as backfeed our own system if it's black. So as soon as that big generator kicks on, if the little generators are running, they're gonna think city's power is back on, and they're gonna go.
they'll shut off.
Yeah, they'll go through their,
So
Shut.
during the peak periods, which really has an effect, if I understood what you explained, really has effect on what our rates look like for that period. When does, and I guess you may not be able to answer this, but when would this usually kick in? Is it going to be, August, it's 100 degrees out, it's noon, everybody has their AC on high, or is this 2 AM on August when it's 90 degrees out?
yeah, no, it never has been 2 AM. But it would be, right now, the peaks occur, and it's every month, so they fluctuate seasonally, but it's typically between as early as 4 PM and maybe as late as 8 PM. And like I say, it's just for 1 hour. I don't know if it's ever been 9 PM, but part of the problem is it's the load in the region is starting to flatten out, which is good as far as, peak units that are dirtier, don't have to kick on, which is good. It's more economical for the entire system, but it makes it harder to predict the peaks. So the peaks are getting a little bit more diverse. It's a little
So if
harder.
you can effectuate during the peak periods and kind of level out the usage through this, let's say it kicks in at 4 PM and it runs for 3 hours, will this have a positive effect on rates?
What it'll do, it'll help stabilize our rates. So as opposed to, it'll represent a savings to us.
Okay.
Yes, definitely. And we're already doing that now with the battery and the solar. So we do have some data as far as, how often the
So
battery.
that takes the battery storage plus this, meshes them together.
This would all reduce our readings at the substation, which would result in a lower bill for transmission incapacity.
I would also mention the opportunist, when the conversation steered toward potential savings, I did ask, and, it's on the early level, there's no agreement here, but if Meld would be willing to entertain some type of, 5% or an amount that's agreeable to the board, return to the town out of that savings and be set aside in an account for open space or whatever purpose you would deem to be appropriate, something to consider.
I think the other piece too that we talked about with the building committee last night in terms of dollars and cents is that, so we would still have to do the diesel generators for the two buildings for life safety, server room, radio room. In the current scheme, if the project is built as bidded, we don't have emergency generation at Town Hall COA outside of basic life safety. So that means we could never use that facility as a shelter because we, in an attempt to try to make the project affordable, said we need to keep public safety on. We're only gonna do life safety at the Town Hall COA. So this would resume our opportunity to use Town Hall COA as a shelter. It would also mean that the two diesel generators and all of their accessories and conduit would also fall to what Meld is looking to do for us, which on the construction side alone has a project cost savings of about $405,000 that Meld would then be putting forward for the diesel work. And that's, again, like an early rough number. What that doesn't calculate, and something that we're working to look at with the OPM, is with Meld coming on board to do this, they would then be responsible for the upkeep and maintenance of the generators, which is a cost we would no longer bear, or a task we would no longer bear. And as the Town Hall Community Center is going to be lit and heated with electric power, and the Public Safety Building is to be lit and heated with mostly electric power, though there is some other heat mechanisms in the bays of the fire station because of their quick release and need to be reheated quickly. There would be a cost savings if the ratepayers see a cost savings, which is great, but then we as a ratepayer would also see a cost savings on our very electric buildings. So it would essentially like create an infinite catapulting effect to our own budget.
So you're gonna supply the diesel generators too as part of this plan?
Yes. The idea would be that that's why I originally, brought it up, was so that you guys could save money. So yes,
It's because,
but the number keeps going up, so I.
so the diesel generators, I get the rationale for the diesel generator at the public safety facility, because if anything ever happened to the natural gas supply coming into town, which people think, well, that'll never happen, then you look over at Lawrence.
Don't know that.
And say, yeah, that can happen. That building and the operations that happen in that building, and then support the staff that are outside the building, that needs to be 24/7. So for the purposes of the building being used for a shelter, the other building, the likelihood of this unit being able to ensure that there's continuous power to both buildings is very high. So now as I think you said, the diesel generator becomes kind of a belt and suspenders. Do we need the belt and suspenders for the,
For basic
Town
life
hall?
safety, yes. For emergency lighting, if somebody's in the elevator when the power goes out, it's enough power to get people out of the elevator and have the emergency
do we have
lighting.
that at all of our buildings now that have
That's
elevators?
code, that's for the new building construction, and it's for the fire alarms, the emergency lights, getting somebody out of the elevator, and I defer to Chief Lacoste if there's something I'm forgetting in that basic
You're
life
saying
safety.
that, Jackie, the town hall building is gonna have a diesel generator or not?
Yes, that it, no matter what happens with this proposal with Mike, there is a diesel generator for each building in the plan. At Town Hall COA, it's life safety, like fire alarms, emergency lights, that's it. But at the public safety building, it's the fire alarms, the emergency
Right.
lights,
I
plus the
understand.
server radio room.
And you're gonna supply all the diesel generators for all the buildings?
Will you
As
maintain
long
the
as it
diesel?
doesn't keep
Yeah.
getting.
That's
bigger.
it.
And you'll maintain the diesel generators?
Yes,
Two only.
yeah, two.
And one of these,
And one of these, correct. I'd love to do two, but I
in
don't
the
think.
middle
you
of the
could find
parking lot.
And has the building committee looked at location to see where it can fit in?
They met last night and discussed it. And ultimately, the determination was to send it back to the select board to see if you're interested in it before they,
Before they went down the road
Dig
of
too deep into
saying
it.
this is where it should be or shouldn't be. So I get that argument, so,
I just don't like it on the parking lot. I mean, I know it might not make a difference in 20, but what if it does? I mean,
So-
because I don't recall that in the plan that we had room to put that type of parking lot anywhere else on the property.
so that-
Unless we do.
so there was that impervious parking lot, is what you're describing. It got pulled back because of its proximity to the Eagle buffer. But that space was still open. And actually, since we had learned that a new drainage structure or pond or retention pond or something is now actually being suggested to go there. So in terms of the exact location, we don't definitively know. It's gonna have to be outside the Eagle buffer, but far enough away from the public safety facility.
How tall is the tallest building there?
That would be
Compliant.
Bancroft.
With zoning, if I recall correctly from when we were permitting. So,
So
Like
I'm-
35
so
feet.
tall,
Yeah,
tall
so I'm
enough-
asking, so if this is inches, we're looking at about 36 and a half
37, I
feet,
was gonna say.
almost 30, so let's just call it
Well-
concrete pad and everything.
Although I think
Oh,
you
no,
have
this
to get
includes
a-
the concrete pad.
You have to
So-
go before the planning board to get
So
it higher
the, so
than.
the stack is 37 feet, but the main function is 24. However, it also depends where we site it. If there's tree coverage, also, we have the communications tower. So part of the ZBA permit covered the fact that we had the communications tower. That's higher than normal. So
But
that's,
the reason why I'm saying is, this is, with the stack, about the same height as the tallest portion of one of these buildings.
the stack, yes, yeah.
Including the
26
stack.
feet?
So let's just call it
Without the stack, about
for round numbers, 36 and a half feet. So if the building at its highest point is 35, 36 feet, we're probably looking, this is where I would argue, to the extent possible, this is the building committee, and then ultimately, if approval is needed elsewhere, not this board, for location, is that it be as unobtrusive to, obviously, the neighbors, but also to what is going to be the sight line of these two buildings, which the thing I'm really happy about is they're actually really pretty buildings. And the whole common experience that's going to be out in front there in the green space experience. I don't want to see, off to the side parking lots, and I took clearly what our Public Works Director said, is these new parking lots are going to be a nightmare to plow because of the islands and the green space that's put there. I understand why, it's calming and safety measures, but also sightline measures. I just wouldn't like to see what is going to be the aesthetic look of this out in front or right to the side of the building with an equally as tall generation with a catwalk and so forth there. If that can be hidden to the best extent possible, and not be right in the middle of a parking lot. Now, I know your equipment needs to be able to access it, have to be some, you're not gonna drive across the lawn to get to it, but, both your bucket trucks and et cetera will have to access it, I get that.
So, are we to vote on this to approve it, or is
Yeah,
it
what
just
is our
for
action?
information?
I suppose it'd be useful if maybe if you're in support of it as described, to vote as much, and then to send it back to the building committee to pick the actual location. Or process in terms of any
To
additional
accept or,
approval.
accept proposal or support?
Well, whichever.
They're looking for support, I think.
Yeah, for me, I'm supportive of the process for a whole slew of reasons. Part of it is, this could be, at a minimum, a 400+ thousand savings to the project cost right now that built into that was diesel generators. Secondly, the savings that this is going to bring to the MELD ratepayers. Third, belt and suspenders for our project. And then fourth, belt and suspenders to our electric grid of providing even less of an opportunity for an interruption in our power. Now, this isn't, obviously, this and the solar field is not going to cover the whole town, but it's that island that you're talking about. So I think for those four reasons, and then your ongoing maintenance of this and the maintenance of the other generators that you're acquiring is of big need to the town. I would say so. I'm supportive of that, and if this is either a feeling of the board that the building committee needs or even an actual formal vote, I would state that I just really want to be clear that, again, that 36 feet, I would like this as unobtrusive and hidden as possible, and I'm not sure what the contours will be of the property, but in a way that this would have the least effect on sightlines and least effect possible on abutters.
I support everything you said.
Did you get all that?
And I'll
Every word?
second.
Would any of you like to volunteer or volunteer one of your peers to help us negotiate the MOU? Do you have any interest in participating in that process? Or would you like to see a final
With Meld?
document come back? Yep.
Do we have to arm wrestle the chief over this? Is that what-
Not at all. Not at all.
We'll pick a lineman to do that.
I'm honestly, I'm comfortable with you.
Okay,
You'll be our pit bull.
thank you.
It's all positive.
He already injected that 5%. I thought that was pretty shrewd right off the bat.
Brian, do
Well,
you
actually,
do you have the need for us to approve the final location when it's decided, or are you comfortable without that?
I don't think we do. I truly believe the building committee is going to have that in their mindset
Okay.
already, but I understand why, the building committee didn't want to spend the time and energy of saying, well, maybe here, here, or there, and then us say, whoa, no, we don't
Right,
want to do this.
exactly.
They've got enough on their agenda already, so.
And I think they've done a fairly good job, designing the site, so
If-
I don't think they're gonna
Yeah, I agree.
try to mess up the site by not putting it somewhere where it doesn't fit.
So I think that was a motion by Brian and a second by Costa. So is everybody in favor of this? Supportive of this?
Yes.
Aye.
Aye, so you have unanimous support from Ms. West.
So
Thank you, gentlemen.
could I ask on
Thank you.
timing on this? Is this something that would be completed after the project's done? Be done before I assume you'd like to have this tomorrow.
We would.
Yeah.
We would love to. So I've been told by the supplier that it's about a 90-week lead time for the generator itself. Transformers is similar. We're going to need a transformer.
Yeah,
as well.
transformers, I know there's a wicked lead time right now.
Yep, so that's going to be also a long-term, but I think that lines up pretty closely with,
Exactly.
the commission date. So hopefully, but again, we've been told that we're going to get transformers in a year or a year and a half, and 2 years later, we're still waiting, so. Lead times aren't guaranteed anymore, unfortunately.
Yeah, I hear you.
No honor.
It's in good hands. Nice.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks, Mike.
So speaking of the municipal project, I think we have a couple of folks here that want to do some fundraising to put a putting green at the municipal complex to honor the property's history and to honor the former owners. So if you want to come up and introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about what you want to do.
Sure. My name's Dave Dubois. I'm a Middleton resident since 2018. And I live on Kelly Lane, so not too far from the property. I know from college friends and folks who grew up in the area of what the property meant as a golf course. I started playing golf myself on a par 3 course. I grew up in Western Massachusetts, but it was how I learned the game, and just I think there's a lot of history to preserve with the property that touched me personally, and then was introduced to Kevin, who has done quite a bit of research, and what we're looking at and what we're proposing is basically a 3,000 square foot synthetic putting green that would be in honor of Bart Brown, the former owner, and just an area that folks can play the game of golf, which is increasingly becoming less accessible and harder to get young folks to play the game, and so that's kind of the idea.
And the proposal is that this will be funded through donations, as I understand it?
Yeah, and I think we've got a couple quotes, but it's like 60,000 roughly. There's an example in Waltham that was recently put in. Looks beautiful, and I think the quotes, we've got like a handful of quotes, so it'd be around 60K we'd have to raise.
I think it's great. Have you reached out to the Brown family?
I have. I spoke with Bill George, and they were really excited about the idea. They were hoping that the sisters or the family would be honored in some way, and they love this idea.
So are you confident in the ability to raise the funds?
We've got a couple years.
It's going to take a village to raise 60 grand. I know I'll contribute, and we'll do our best. I think that what I've found over the last 5 years, and I grew up on the golf course, that's my home away from home. And I was there in the glory days. Bart Brown was a friend, but maybe more so a mentor. But what I've noticed in the golf community at large is everyone misses the place. Everyone talks about the death in the family and things of that nature. And in my, since the place closed, I originally was hoping to reopen the golf course as an asset to the town, similar to Hillview in North Reading. But just was unfeasible for so many different reasons. And I love the project that's going to happen there. I think it's great for the town. But what I've noticed is, so on Facebook and these other things, I've gotten tremendous feedback from hundreds of people, not just Middleton residents. So yes, I think, especially talking with Justin, you guys will ultimately, or the developers or the planners will ultimately decide where to place this memorial putting green. So I do think that we'll have some ample amount of time to raise funds, and I hope to raise more than 60 grand. I'd like to have some benches or, a little plaque for Mr. Brown. Yes, I think we can raise 60 grand over the next 24 months.
So the first thing I'd say is, it's a great idea. It's an awesome
Thank you.
idea. For about a 2 or 3 year period, I had a standing Friday morning tea time, first off the box, with 3 of my friends. We loved it because we could, on Friday morning, play 18 really bad rounds of golf, holes,
Yep.
grab breakfast at the clubhouse, and then be in Boston for work at 9:15. Well, that's back when traffic to Boston was easier. That's where I learned how to play golf. I grew up in Wakefield, and this was where all of our friends were in the area here, and we played. So I get the affinity for a lot of folks. For me, and I think members of this board and a lot of people in town have been trying to figure out how we can also honor the legacy of the place, but also honor the generosity of the family. It's not lost on anybody, and I'm sure you two understand this, is the price we purchased this for was not the price that the property ultimately could have been worth if somebody purchased it for another purpose.
Yep.
And the Brown family was very clear of the want of what they wanted this property to be used for. They didn't want it to be developed into homes or condos or anything like that. So I've been thinking for some time, how do we kind of honor the generosity of the family, but also the generosity of what the golf course meant for so many years to Middleton residents, and it for, you talk to people about Middleton, it's Richardson's Ice Cream. Well, for a long time, it was Richardson's Ice Cream and Middleton Golf.
Yeah.
And back in the day, Santa's Lookout. So
right.
I think this is an awesome opportunity for us to start the process of how we're actually going to honor the legacy of Bart and his family and the gift,
Remember the monkeys.
really the gift they gave to the town in terms of the price that we paid for this property. So I'm on board with this.
What kind of maintenance does a synthetic putting green need?
It's a great question. So I know you've done quite a bit of research. It's minimal, and I know you looked into some options to have a real putting green, but the maintenance, of course, is much higher. But I think they last about 20 years and relatively low maintenance. And what would you say?
Yeah, I think you need a leaf blower.
Yeah.
Well, maybe a little more, if eagles or seagulls are making deposits on.
Yeah.
Yeah, the one in Waltham, it's beautiful. It's the Joe Lazaro Memorial Public Putting Green, and there's 2 of them. About 6,000 square feet between the 2 of them. And one of the town administrators down there told me that I went down and checked it out and putted on it, and they're very nice to putt on, really nice to practice on. But they'll last between 20 and 30 years, and what I was told is you need a leaf blower to clean it off, otherwise,
And in Waltham,
yep.
is anybody responsible for overseeing the use, or is just anybody?
It's a park where there's a baseball field and a playground and the Joe Lazaro Memorial Putting Green.
But,
So I think the
do
city.
they have like a, sign up, or you just go, and if nobody's using it, you use it?
Yeah, and it's huge. So yes, you help yourself.
How many cups are on like 3,000 square feet?
Yeah, you could easily get 9 in there. You could have up to 18 probably on a 3. I think 9 would be a healthy number of holes spread out.
Yeah.
Yep, good idea. Did I,
Thank
did you, can I get your name? Did you?
Yep, I'm Kevin Johnson.
Johnson, excellent.
Yep, grew up in Boxford, now live in Reading, but really grew up on the golf course. And it was the heyday
So
probably from,
I guess obviously it would be the kind of thing that you'd look at, well, to be when the facility project
Get
is
closer
complete.
down, yeah.
And that way too, to, maximize the best, the most appropriate spot for it and,
Yep.
So,
maybe the dimensions might, maybe you can do a little more.
sure.
So Justin, how would it work with the fundraising? Who would hold the money? Who, would they set up a entity? How would that all
well,
work?
it would have to actually be done by construction process that's happening, because if not, so, let me clue you in on the reality of municipal contracting. So, we've got a price to build this project. If this was a private developer building 2 buildings exactly like this is a private developer, it'd probably be about 40 to 45% less. It's the beauty of what's called the prevailing wage law. So, you may think, great, 60,000, 30,000, whatever the cost is, we're gonna have our contractor come in and do this. It's gonna have to be done under a prevailing wage process. Now, if it's happening on municipal property, it has to go through a whole bidding process or goes through our construction process, correct?
Correct. So more than likely, it might end up being a land lease on behalf of the town. Maybe we don't actually own the asset. I'd want to talk to Maya too, our insurance company, and see what their thoughts are on it in terms of ownership. But and Sarah might have some thoughts on it too, but ideally, we wouldn't touch the money.
Yeah, that would be the easiest and cleanest process, but understanding that, you may look at, you said a $60,000 cost, I just want to be
That
clear.
was the lowest one I found.
That
Most of them were
60,000
around 100 grand.
But that $60,000 cost could be like, say, you were putting one at your private facility.
Yep.
I will tell you, the cost on a municipal facility will absolutely be more, and I would actually say probably a 40 to 45%
Okay.
At least.
factor.
Yep.
The only thing I would ask is, number one, thank you for all of your hard work. I've been following it. I do know the Browns personally. I've known them forever. That being said, I think it's a wonderful idea, and it's also such a good tribute to him. He did give so much to so many people. And like Brian, I've also been trying to think, once this complex was created, or built, what could we do to honor them? My only question is liability. I have a big question mark on liability. I mean, you look at the layout, and there's parking everywhere. Okay, we can carve out some area, probably, but what if we have a cruiser that just pulls in, and not everybody has a good shot? I mean, I wouldn't be putting on it, but what if it hit the window? There's some liability that we would really, really have to get some answers to. The whole concept is wonderful. I hats off to both of you.
You know what, everything we do, we have liability, honestly.
Oh,
We have-
absolutely.
I mean, some of the liability would be similar to just our own parks and
Yeah,
playgrounds.
Little league field,
But
rail
I think,
trail.
I think there's going to be, hopefully at some point, there's going to be, our town common is going to move down there. This will be the future location of certain events that we have in town. I mean, I think of the events that we do now at Memorial Day and Veterans Day that happens on the small green spot in front of,
Library.
in front of the library, which isn't always easy because of the sound of the traffic and the intersection that happens there, and so forth. And I've always was concerned at some of these events with a large number of folks right there on the curb. So there's going to be more events that are going to happen down there. There's going to be passive recreation that's happening, and all the land behind there, that's part of why the CPA acquired, but it was also part of the Browns family want in their selling this property to us, is that a portion of it, and a large portion of it, stays open and green and open for passive recreation. So, I mean, I think, for me, liability could be as similar to just anybody that's hiking on that property on pathways. But I think, to Justin's point of having a conversation with Maya to understand what that means, especially as we've taken it as a gift, not us saying, here's our project, we're building 2 new buildings, a parking lot, and a putting green. And I think there's ways to mitigate all of that. It's probably just going to be covered by the regular policy that's covering that property
And
anyway.
I'm not
Hopefully-
concerned with that part of it at all.
But ultimately, to the question on timing, and, well, the question on fundraising, and one of the reasons for that is timing. So if this is, we're not going to want to have finished this project, buttoned everything up, and then a year later come in and say, well, we now want to crack open the green space, bring in equipment to put the putting green on there. So there'll have to be some timing in terms of our construction schedule, not in conflict with our construction schedule, but not after. I mean, when we're handed the keys to the facilities, we want to be done. And so I think that'll have an effect on your fundraising process as well, but there's ways to coordinate all of that.
As well as the architecture of it. I don't want it just flat.
Some challenge, some contours.
So Justin, what are the steps to make this happen?
I want to double check with Sarah first, who conveniently is up on the screen, just from the financial aspect, and also I'm sure she's probably going to have to do a little research as well. But I'd say on an early level, if the select board blessed it, if you have an interest in it, I think it kind of sets these 2 gentlemen on a trajectory where they can start coordinating fundraising efforts. When it comes down to actually constructing it, if the funds are raised, a location's going to have to be picked. I don't know if the building committee frequently reminds us that they're a committee for buildings, and they're not a committee for the grounds. And so I don't know how much input they would realistically want there. When it comes to the sequencing of construction that Mr. Cresta pointed out, given the scale of the project, it could be something that could be done, maybe the general contractor would have interest in doing it as a change order. You're allowed to do up to a certain amount, and that 60,000 number would be well under the threshold. That said, it couldn't be contracted through us, because then you're running into prevailing wage. So that's something else we'd have to try to work out.
Well, I think it's going to have to fall into prevailing wage, because it's happening on the envelope of the project that we're putting shovels in the ground anyway, or banging nails. 2 items that, obviously, I mean, because when we were looking to outsource some of our field mowing, a private company can push a mower over it, but the first time they rake or shovel or spread mulch, that falls into prevailing wage.
Right.
So putting a shovel in the ground to this, putting the material down, that falls into prevailing wage.
And I do try to avoid the appearance of trying to deliberately skirt around prevailing wage.
Well, there's going to be a lot of focus on this project by organizations that are going to want to ensure that the contractors that are working there are being paid prevailing wage.
So that basically would mean that you may need to up your 60,000 figure.
Yep. Noted.
So for them to get started as far as fundraising, would they set up an entity and hold, how does the money actually get held in the meanwhile?
Sarah, do you have any thoughts on that? Are you available to jump in early?
I need to research, but I would imagine they would have to set up a corporation, a 503C, something along those lines. And then the money would come over as a donation, or the item would come over as a donation. I honestly don't have a lot of thoughts at this moment, because I'm just figuring this out.
And it may not necessarily have to be a 501c3. I mean,
I don't think it does.
your last name's Johnson, right?
I raised money, Kevin.
Yeah, Kevin, so you could come in and write the check yourself, and
That's right.
you know, or it could be, now, for purposes of supporting the fundraising, and an individual knows I'd like to write a check, then I can write it off, it's a 501c3. I mean, I think that's probably more up to your entity. I think the bigger issue is how does the dollars get expended? Is it transitioned as a gift to the town of Middleton? Is it what you were talking about, like that that use,
Land lease.
land lease use agreement, which may be problematic in terms of how long that could be, and other items? I think council would have to actually weigh in on that as well. What I don't want is the town to be the repository, and Sarah will surely agree with this, is if you're raising money and you've raised 10,000, you're giving 10,000 to us, and then you've raised another 5,000, you give 5,000 to us.
Right.
Because if you're unable to raise the amount of money that's needed for this, what do we do with the 15,000 that we're holding?
So, you know, I think we're all supportive of the concept. So,
Absolutely.
Justin, Sarah, you guys talk with Jay, tell him and do some research, talk with these gentlemen about what the process is for getting it done, and knowing that that's not wasted effort, since we're supportive of the outcome if we can get there.
Perfect.
Sounds great.
Okay, you have our support.
There's going to be a lot of interest in this.
Yeah,
Thank you.
Yeah, we appreciate
Yes.
it.
thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Thanks, Justin.
Okay, we're gonna move along to an update on the fiscal year 25 budget with our finance director, who is on Zoom.
Good evening, everyone. Let me just try to share my screen and get my PowerPoint up here. I am going to try to keep this a little on the brief side, since we do have a budget meeting next week with the reading of the warrant, but we'll go into a little bit more detail. But just wanted to give everybody an update, kind of where the overall budget stands at this point in time. Changes since our last meeting, all the salaries and wages for relevant compensation classification staff were done in ClearGov, along with a corresponding reduction to the compensation reserve. So that is a net zero item on that one. Yesterday, elementary school committee met and announced a $201,625 reduction to their budget. ClearGov and my budget documents that you'll see in the next couple of slides are reduced to the 4% guidance that we had given to the schools, just to balance the budget at this point in time and to start really putting everything towards the override. Can you hear me okay, Jackie? Or?
Oh, we can hear you loud and clear. I'm just trying to show your face without blocking the sides.
Oh, okay. Masco budget was adjusted based on the latest to just a 1.9% increase. So I think that actually increased the budget slightly from the last number that we had in there. And then real estate taxes were adjusted to balance the budget. So as we get into the next slide, you can see here, let me just move my face on my screen too. The total revenues right now are increasing 3.4%. No numbers really, other than the property taxes, have changed from the last time that this was presented. On the expenditure side, we have town services at 4.4%. Elementary schools are holding to that 4% guidance that we had given them. Masco is at 1.9, and Essex North Shore Tech is at 12.3. That is still their preliminary budget. They haven't finalized it, but usually their budget doesn't change very much from when we get it to when they finalize it.
So, Sarah, so the elementary school vote that happened yesterday is they have a number at 4% and then they have a number above 4%? What is the?
Yes,
What is
I'll
the?
get to that in the next couple
Okay,
of slides.
okay, thanks.
Just as outstanding items, finalizing a lot of the school budgets, and also the police CBA hasn't been finalized, but we do have that money still in comp reserve, so that's just, will hopefully just be a netting out from the comp reserve to the police department budget. So then, Brian, to the point you were making, as far as the override goes, the last bullet above the total is the elementary school's operating override. They're currently at $375,000 for an override. That's above the 4% guidance. I don't have their percentage in front of me for what that is. But that's
my human
where it is
calculator
for
here-
as of yesterday.
Yeah, my human calculator next to me thinks it's about 7%.
Because 575 is 4%, then, so 375 is probably around 3%.
There you go.
That's the elementary schools. The rest of the override, I kind of rounded the numbers that we had presented at the supplemental budget just to get ease of calculations. So included in that would be the 6-month cost of sorry, I have the wrong title in there, the deputy, I don't think I have the full title in there, for facilities. Adding in 2 patrol officers to the police department, the 3 firefighter paramedics, the 2 part-time library circulation assistants, and then I pulled out all the employee benefits, the health insurance, Medicare, dental, and life insurance that we provide as employee benefits for all the above positions, so that it just kind of clearly shows the true cost of the positions themselves versus the added benefits to it. So the override at this point in time is just over $1 million at $1,023,200 for the FY25 funding for the override. And then, excuse me, getting into the additional capacity as discussed with the same methodology that we did back in FY17 for the override question, to try to build in some additional capacity to last an additional 3 to 5 years based on future staffing needs. For the town, this would roughly be $757,000 based on, again, items that we had talked about at the budget meetings, staffing for police, fire, library, seaway recreation, planning, conservation, plus the benefits associated with those positions. Excuse me.
Bless you.
To bring the overall override question to $1,780,200. And I will, if anyone has any questions with how I came to that, we can get into it. I do also have just one more slide with estimates. Again, this is going to be for informational purposes only, as, when we finally set the tax rate, that's really when these numbers are known. All of this is kind of based off of what the current average single-family home value is, which is $935,466. So I've kind of broken down what the current tax rate is on here and what the overall impact of the override question would be, which is 32 cents per thousand. And I've kind of in the middle here broken out what that means to various residents in town based on what the home value would be, just to kind of give everybody an idea of what this cost would be on an annual basis. Again, these are estimates only. It's very early in the process to really be adding values to this, but I wanted to at least provide as much information as possible in terms of the override.
So Sarah, are these numbers based on the 1,023,000 or the 1,780,000?
The $1,023,000, because that would be the
Yeah,
actual
for the
impact
FY25
next
piece.
year.
Okay.
So the big question is, do we do a separate override for the school or include it, right?
I recommend against doing a menu of options.
Yeah, no, it works best, I think, it's all for the benefit of the town. I mean, it benefits the police department, the fire department, the DPW, the library, the council of aging, recreation commission, and the school. So that's kind of the way, I think about it.
Okay.
To meet the needs of all of these other departments and provide the service that people kind of expect and we think is necessary. That's the money that we have to ask for, and hopefully our taxpayers can understand the need and will feel that they can support it.
And I think the word needs is understated, because these weren't wants that, the department heads and everything people wanted. These were needs that we all recognize and understand that, the taxpayers deserve and should have, so.
Well, this board and the finance committee, since early in the budget process the year prior, have been very clear that this is coming. I remember standing on the floor of town meeting last year when the co-chair of the finance committee got up and gave his report. He actually stated that there were decisions that were made not to fund last year, specifically the police and fire pieces, that wanted to be very clear were coming this year. And I think both the two boards have been very clear that this is coming. Secondly, the number of communities that are dealing with this exact scenario this year, we're not an outlier. We're more of the norm this year of, think of everybody's budget at home. Costs for goods, costs for services, and costs for personnel have all gone up exponentially due to just the environment on this. One question I actually had, Sarah, one of the previous slides, could you go to the slide that you had the Essex Tech piece on it? So Essex Tech is looking at about a 12, that's an eye strain.
12.3.
12.3% increase. So I remember back to 2017 when we had an override. Part of what we were proposing then was because there was significant assessment increases that were happening at Essex North Shore as the school opened up. So do we have any line of sight? Is this more of just a enrollment bump that happened this year that, more Middleton students are entered, or is this becoming more of a norm out of Essex North Shore? Because as we try to look at the go forward of that 3 to 5 to maybe 6 year period, 5 to 7 year maybe, of this override really building us capacity, the 12% number there is what gives me a little pause.
With 4 more students.
No, I understand, but is this becoming the norm, or was this just a blip this year?
So their overall budget increased roughly 8% for Essex North Shore. So our portion of it, our per pupil cost went up slightly. We do have, as Costa stated, 4 additional students as well. So our per pupil cost for Essex North Shore Tech, I believe is just under $17,000. So 4 students times 17,000 is going to be our baseline increase anyways this year for Essex Tech.
For at least the next 4 years.
She needs to, can you be a little louder because you're the first?
Oh, sure, at least for the next 4 years. I mean, we may be having a.
Well, it depends. If the graduating this year seniors are replaced by the same size, then our increase for FY '26 should be about what the overall budget increase is. If it's more, the incoming is more than the outgoing, then we'll have another big bump. If it's less, we could have a decrease.
Yeah, I guess what
And
I'm.
that's
I guess
outside
what
of
I'm
our
trying to get
control.
my arms around is, so, Masco's budget increase, overall budget increase this year is rather small compared to previous years. The elementary overall budget increase is rather large compared to previous years. I'm trying to figure out is Essex North Shore, and this, I'm not asking for an answer from you, Sarah, because you don't probably have the answer to this, but I think our representative should at least be able to give us some line of sight to this. Is this a one-year correction in their budget, that 8% that they promoted in their baseline budget this year, or is this a multi-year plan to increase programming over there, expand capacity, build facility, build equipment? That's what would be helpful for me to understand. We could have 4 additional new Middleton students next year at Essex North that we will have to contend with, but it's also what is happening on their overall operational increase. That was the number that stood out to me. Now, the change is 107,000. It's, you know, as a percentage, it's big for the Essex North Shore assessment, but not as big as a raw number. But that, I'm thinking about the out years of our override capacity, because that was the issue that scared the heck out of us when that school went live in that first year, where we saw a massive increase in our assessment. Now, it could be worse. We could be Peabody right now, or Danvers and others.
And just, look at it this way, the required minimum contribution of all the communities in Essex Tech is 20.5 million. Their budget is 23.3 million. So about 12% over minimum contribution. You know, Masco's is almost twice the minimum contribution.
I'm just wondering if this is the first of a multi-year effort to increase programming and others, and don't get me wrong, great school, great program over there, I'm not opposed to it.
They are, some of their projects, increasing
What's fun in that?
and capacity, but if you increase capacity, it depends on which community's kids
Are applying.
fill up that capacity. If it's all non-Middleton students, then next year we could be sitting down here with a decrease.
Or we could have the same number of students and not see any increase, but we could be looking at another 8% increase in our assessment due to programming. I'm just, maybe at some point when this budget process is over, we could have our Essex Tech rep come in to actually have a conversation of like, what is the, because what we can't give Essex Tech is guidance, like we can't give Masco guidance.
Right.
But we can give our school committee member guidance. So, sorry, thank you, Sarah.
Yeah, thank you. So we have another meeting on this next week, correct?
Next week.
Thursday,
Thursday.
the 28th.
Yeah, okay. Any other questions before Sarah goes for her? No?
I agree with the number, and I agree with the capacity that we're building here. Now we just have to work on selling it.
Okay, thank you, Sarah.
Great job.
Sarah.
Thank you,
Thanks.
Sarah.
Thank you.
Okay. So we're gonna review the annual town meeting warrant. We all have a copy of it. This is pretty final, I guess, right?
It's pretty close to it, so we're building a house on shifting sands a little bit. So I'll run through it and I'll point out any significant changes or any areas where we still have some outstanding data that we need to kind of build these things out. And I will say, even over the past hour, I've received feedback from people in this room for 2 changes versus what I printed just before the meeting, so stick with me here. Article 1, to hear committee reports, is pretty standard. Article 2, based on feedback we're receiving, and I can't help but feel like I'm jinxing it, but I don't think we're going to need to fund any type of snow and ice deficit, so we're striking that for now. I hate
Can you
sa-
knock on some wood or
I was
something?
gonna say, I hate saying it out loud, but it is what
We
it
all
is.
stop breathing.
Prior year bills, we're looking at a whopping $90 for Article 3. Article 4, fiscal '24 budget correction for the shared health grant. So Jackie's been working on this initiative, but basically it's looking like we're gonna take over the reins. And in doing that for this grant program, the money's gonna have to move a little differently. This will correct fiscal '24 for our shared health inspector. What is his official title?
Shared health inspector.
Oh, nailed it. Shared health inspector. So that's just a corrective action for that, budgetary housekeeping.
Can I add one note to that?
Please.
Mike Hugo, who is legal counsel for the Mass Health Officers Association, who helps communities with these grants, will be getting us language for this section. So there will be a non-substantive from what Justin's just talked about, but in terms of language, to make sure it complies and makes the DOR happy, we may see a little bit of movement there.
Thank you. Article 5 is just the outstanding police union contract, so as Sarah mentioned, there are some reserves that could pick up a significant chunk of, or all of that, but until we know what the final number is, we're just keeping that as a placeholder in case we have to supplement fiscal '24. Fiscal '25 would be built into the budget, so it wouldn't need a separate article. Article 6, compensation for elected officials. Article 7 is the general operating budget, so we're still narrowing that down, as Sarah highlighted. Article 8 is the override. So looking at the way it was done for, in 2016 for fiscal 17, is that correct? It followed this format, so what we are going to go ahead and do is, by example, the Middleton School Department will call out 375, whatever the police department lands at, fire department, so on and so forth. Anything else that would fall in those categories, we'll break out and then have a lump sum figure in the second green
Is
X
the
out box.
school committee override all personal services?
No, and that's a great question. So today I asked Scott and Steve if they could break that down and get it to us early next week at the latest, so that I can distribute that in advance. Reason being, we want to give the Middleton taxpayer an understanding of either what they're digging deeper to pay for in the form of taxes, or what they're risking cutting by not voting to support it. So we'll have a little bit of a clearer picture there. Article 9, the Community Preservation Act budget. For the
One change, the administrative expense for the committee is going down to $500 instead of $1,000.
to 9, sorry, it's going down 500?
Yeah, instead of 1,000, it's 500.
Okay, thank you. So we'll amend that. And that 500 is not swinging anywhere else, so the total is going to decrease by 500, I would assume?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you. Article 10, and the last time we reviewed this, there wasn't anything, but since we've had the capital meeting, 60,000 for the library.
And the Affordable Housing Trust is asking for 80.
80,000.
Perfect, okay. Affordable housing trust.
What would that be used for exactly?
So the Affordable Housing Trust is just finishing the process with MAPC, which is kind of setting a little bit of our rules of the road, but some of the items through both the survey that's been done, but also the work by the committee that we're going to start focusing on short, medium, and long term. So we received a grant already from the state, from MAPC to do that work. Last year, we received seed money from the Community Preservation Committee to actually begin a process of funding that would be used on those short, medium, and long term. This 80,000 is our request to supplement to that, so we can start then, after we whittle down our list of what we want to start accomplishing, we can actually start funding.
So give me an example of something the 80,000 would be used for.
Oh, let's see. We've had some conversations with Habitat for Humanity and other groups about the possibility, and we haven't made a decision if we're going to do this or not, but a possibility of some grant or loan programs to support individuals that need both emergency or life safety or accessibility work in their home to be able to remain in their home or remain in the community. We've started to give some thought about more medium and probably more long-term opportunities of, are there organizations, developers, or not-for-profits that may want to build some affordable or renovate some housing into affordable in the town. Some of those dollars could be utilized to support those efforts.
Can I give you one other
Yeah.
concrete example? So we have some deed restricted affordable homes that are not deed restricted in perpetuity. So if we don't work and do the legal legwork to re-restrict them, they'll fall off our subsidized housing
Which
inventory.
puts us
Aware of that,
behind. Yeah, puts us, it's like one
That's a
step
big
forward
one.
and 3 steps
Yeah.
back.
Yeah.
So we're not, I would say, we're not at a point of, here's our 4 or 5 items that we're gonna drive to, but we're getting a lot closer.
And from the Community Preservation Committee standpoint, this 80,000 is all in the affordable housing reserve. So if it stays there, there's no chance of it being spent if it goes to the Affordable Housing Trust. And they've proven over the past year that they're actually working and doing towards something. Then they will have a pot of money along with what they got last year to be able to, implement these things as the opportunities arise. So that's why.
And we really want to try to have a couple of small, shorter-term opportunities that we can implement, because we want to show some momentum, but we don't, I don't want to squirrel away money for something that we hope to do in 10 years.
Right. Okay, thanks.
What would you call that item, by the way? Just Affordable Housing Trust, MAPC consultant?
No, affordable, funding the affordable housing
Yeah,
reserve.
use whatever they
There's,
deem that appropriate.
language in last year's that you can steal from, if
Okay.
that's helpful.
Wasn't trying to remember. Yeah, 200,000 last year, so
Okay.
similar
I
language.
think we called it a transfer to the trust so that it didn't have a specific purpose. They could use it for anything that was CPA eligible within their purview.
Okay. So that brings the total for CPA to 140,000. Article 11, revolving fund spending limits for the Council on Aging, Recreation, and Stormwater. That hasn't changed. Article 12, this one's a little hot off the presses. The SESD figures, those have all been updated since your last meeting. It is my understanding that those might shift, though. So we're going to keep an eye on that. Article 13, Water Enterprise Budget, same. Those are accurate, real numbers. We've made some progress there. Article 14, we didn't have this figure the last time we met, now we do. We're anticipating $258,212 for MELB, so thank you for that contribution. Increase from what we had projected. Article 15, transfers to reserve account. So we ran through this a little bit when we were talking about the free cash amounts at the budget Saturday for capital. So it's totaling in 600,000. What you're looking at is 100,000 for OPEB, 250,000 for the facilities stabilization fund, 50,000 to the stabilization fund, 50,000 to the pension stabilization fund, 100,000 to the capital stabilization fund, and 50,000 to the special ed stabilization fund, totaling in $600,000. So those are real numbers now.
So, I know there's been some potential discussion of, do we want to or not want to have a fall special? And in the past, we've made allocations in the annual with an expectation that when the fall town meeting came, we would likely be making some potential additional. Given that there's a possibility there would not be a fall special town meeting, do you feel that these numbers are appropriate, given that we may not be reallocating additional until May of '25?
I feel it's adequate. I don't know if Sarah's still lurking on there.
I probably didn't speak loud enough for
Sarah,
her.
could you hear that question?
I could not hear it, was getting broken up. Is the question about if we should put additional money into the reserves?
No, but the question was, Sarah, if we end up not having a fall special town meeting,
Yeah.
and we have this annual, and our next town meeting would be the annual in 2025, which would mean that we would not be doing any additional supplementing to these stabilization funds. Do we feel that this number for all of these funds is appropriate for the annual, given that there may not be a fall?
I do, mainly because we, after all of our free cash and warrant articles that also need free cash associated with capital, we have about $109,000 left in our free cash. So this does kind of max out our free cash to the extent that I really feel comfortable with at this point in time. But Brian, that's not to say that the money that we would have put in the fall, we just add that to what we're gonna put in next spring.
Okay, yep, okay.
Thank you, Sarah.
You're welcome.
Article 16, the capital budget, so that's nearly fully baked. Sarah and I are gonna meet early next week, and she's gonna fill me in on that. The only outstanding item is the Fuller Meadow parking lot, where I'm meeting with the members of the schools, later this week or early next week to finalize what that's going to look like in terms of the scope. Turning the page to Article 17, Essex Tech debt. So this was a carryover from last year, and admittedly, functionally, I'm not as familiar with it as I'd like to be. Sarah, do you have any background on that while we have you? Really getting our money's worth tonight, sorry.
That's it. I couldn't hear which article it was.
The Essex Tech debt, is that a reoccurring expense that we have every year that's held separate from their assessment?
Yes, that is, no, it's part of their assessment, it's just their capital portion of their assessment, so similar to what we do with Masco. Usually if we're gonna fund, we treat it like our capital items as well, where we pull that out. Is that what we're talking about?
Yes. Well,
I mean, the $20,000 that's in the Essex Tech assessment for capital should be in our capital
Budget.
you know, so it wouldn't be a separate article. So, but there is also in that, you know, assessment spreadsheet, a $71,500 debt service assessment. Now, I
That
don't,
we have in our operating budget.
okay, so again,
so we might not need that article.
I don't,
I don't think I made a note on that.
I wonder if this was a band anticipation note for the work that look like they're buttoning up over there now. I wonder if this was separate from their traditional, not capital, but long-term debt.
Yeah.
I think it was originally a placeholder from the debt that they went into last summer, and we didn't get the notification from. But I had made a note that we should check with Jay, because it may be superfluous at this juncture.
Oh, it defaults automatically.
Because
Yeah.
we missed it, because they missed the deadline with a lot of us for town meeting. So it's automatically not disapproved if the time passes. So we may just want to check with Jay. I had made
No.
a note in the.
That's when they came in the fall and kind of mea culpa'd after
Oh,
the fact.
yeah, yeah. Oops.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
So-
okay, there we go. All right, knew we'd get there.
If that's what that's relating to, we don't have any information from Essex Tech regarding that.
Okay.
Other than they did a ban and they were able to absorb the majority of the ban for that within their operating budget with local receipts. So that assessment did not get passed on to the town.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
We'll triple check that on the back end, but I think we've resolved it. Article 18, the Masco capital request. So as I mentioned earlier, we're still waiting on language from Masco, who's getting it from Hilltop. We can't get it directly. So we'll give them another nudge.
Do we have clarity on this? I know during the capital meeting, there was some comment that this does not require a 3 community.
anything that involves borrowing.
Borrowing
in-
requires
is-
all 3.
And this references the $5 million borrowing for the OPM and designer for the roof, HVAC, and building management system.
Okay, so this requires all 3 towns to pass?
Yes.
And it has
And
to-
2/3 because it's being bonded.
And
at
the
ballot.
override.
Yeah, in an override vote.
So 6 votes are needed to go positive for Masco to be able to access that $5 million.
Okay.
So hopefully we'll have an update on that sooner rather than later. But we have already expressed them that we're waiting on them.
Well, I mean, the school committee hasn't, tomorrow they're taking the, they're certifying the budget and taking the vote to authorize borrowing.
Fuller Meadow roof, we're waiting on Hilltop for that, so maybe I can't criticize Masco too much there. Article 21 is misnumbered. It should be 20, but trust funds, investment income, local option adoption, so we did get some updated language on this. So it's part of the fiscal 24 state budget, chapter 28 of the Acts of 2023. one of the items they had in there, kind of took some of the handcuffs off local municipalities in terms of where we can or can't park our money, for investment income. So it would allow us to, as part of the prudent investment rule, allow us to look into a broader range of investment opportunities, basically. Article 22, tax deferral limit increase, and Debbie, I don't know if you want to chime in on this one, but it's from the Board of Assessors, and effectively, and I don't know the exact year, but the threshold for a deferral limit increased from 20 to 30,000. Rather than going back every however many years and upping this number, and this is a pretty good idea, the recommendation is to tie it to something like the circuit breaker or state income tax credit, so that whatever income-based formula that would fluctuate outside of us, so we wouldn't have to go and do this every time.
We're looking at tying it to the circuit breaker, because circuit breaker is updated every single year for seniors, for income asset, blah, blah, blah. It just makes sense, because if we're looking at trying to encourage any seniors in town that may or may not be able to pay their taxes in full, they can defer part or all of their taxes. So using the circuit breaker guidelines, that gives them a lot more eligibility, because the numbers before that we had were just, they were so outdated. And we currently do not have any deferrals, but we are trying to encourage people to, fill out the application, defer your taxes, and, if you can pay $6,000 or you can pay $10,000 and your total tax bill is $5,000, then just pay the $5,000. So we're just trying to ease the burden of the increase in tax on the elderly, that's all.
So just one more tool in the toolkit. Love a good assessor-related article. You don't see them pop up that often. That's always nice. Article 23, I just have to get the language on this, but we spoke about it previously. It's just correcting a mistake from last year. Was it last year or the year prior?
No, it's many years,
Oh.
many moons.
It referenced a wrong chapter or section, so we're going to go ahead and just fix that. So a couple things have since dropped off. Article 24, the Maple Street Bridge component, we've hit the point in the year where we know that's just not going to happen.
That's
So
not happening.
It's not a thing. We'd put the winter parking ban bylaw on there, and then learned today that it's actually a rule and reg and not something that needs to be done at annual town meeting. So at an upcoming meeting, probably over the summer, when things are a little lighter, we can bring a policy forward. You can all debate the merit of it and then change it as you see fit. MBTA zoning, we're finalizing the language with the consultant, but that's pretty much been put to bed for anybody.
Two-thirds vote also.
Yep, 2/3 votes, it's a zoning change. The ADU and the two-family component have officially been set aside since the last time we reviewed this. And then two items that I would add that are not on here. One is the easement for the 40B project, and the other is the $1 million capital item for Masco. I had assumed wrongly that we lumped that in with our entire capital plan, but we're going to hold it out separate. So as an update, that $1 million is going to be divided over 2 years, not perfectly evenly, but over 2 years. And there's a soft commitment from Boxford and Topsfield, which I had joined to pay for that in free cash, which I understand lowers the limit, but it just seemed from an accounting perspective easier for us to do, but it lowers the threshold in terms of 2/3 versus 50%.
And what would the, because free cash rather than bonding or financing?
We had concerns that some of the items on that $1 million list weren't things you should be borrowing
Well,
for.
it's the life expectancy that is So what would we be doing this in a single year vote? Or we'd have to do this again next year if it's being split over 2 years?
The second half would come up again next year.
And to my earlier question, is this a 3-town vote or a 2 of 3-town vote?
Just like the.
Budget.
The turf.
The turf last year, it was part of the operating and capital budget, which needs 2 out of 3. So by not going, when Masco was here on Capital Saturday, they were expecting to have $6 million as an override, the 5 for the roof, et cetera, and the $1 million, for this, and it would take 6 votes, among the 3 towns, by agreeing to pay for it out of free cash. It reduces from 6 votes going their way down to 2 votes going their way.
And so this would be, our portion for FY '25 will be,
So it's not divided exactly, and I don't have the,
Approximately 132.
I was gonna say about
Your
140.
portion would be 135,586.
There we go.
Well,
So ballpark.
that, I think, is a little high by about $1,500, because I think they're using the
wrong percentage.
percent, that's 33.9% of the 400,000, where our operating percentage is 33.55. And last year, we adopted, passed an amendment to the regional agreement that matches the capital percentage to the operating percentage, so.
I'll follow up with them and ask, but the main takeaway is it's not a true $500,000, and it's not a true third of that $500,000, so.
Yeah.
Fair. But we'll nail down what the exact number is. And then just at the back end of the document, we had updated, and thank you to Eileen for getting this to me earlier today, the terms and positions that are up for the upcoming year. So the other outstanding thing is the ballot questions that we're anticipating to come up, so the operating override and the Masco debt.
How about the roof for here?
And the Fuller Meadow roof.
No,
So.
I'm
nope.
sorry. It's not a debt exclusion, so it doesn't require a ballot. It's,
Oh,
we're doing,
'cause
we're going
yeah.
into debt, but we're not excluding the debt. So
Right.
the vote at town meeting appropriates, but the ballot is what excludes it.
I know, but why aren't, this is ultimately gonna be a larger project to actually fix, so why?
Because you don't want to exclude the ban that we're not going to be paying until we know the true amount when we go to do the bond, because it will take another vote to do the bond.
Which we're
Okay,
kind of
so
doing.
So we're
when the-
taking the roof, we're not going to include any type of future debt exclusion for the cost of this roof?
This is just the design and permitting
Design
ban.
phase.
And then there'll be, when we know the number of the construction, there'll be a separate vote for town meeting to take for the appropriation of the construction money and the exclusion of that. And at that time, we can exclude the ban as well.
I thought, I must have misunderstood, I thought when the superintendent and the assistant superintendent came in, they had mentioned that as part of the submission for the school building authorities, trying to remember what they call it, the rapid
A
project,
statement of interest.
that part of the statement of interest, we had to show that we were committed to funding it.
Which we are committing to funding it, we're appropriating it, we're just not excluding it from our levy. So it'll be within the levy limit budget, because we don't have to pay anything this year, because you don't pay in the first year of a ban.
We can double check with the schools too, just to make sure we're not accidentally blowing them up needlessly. But this was our understanding of it.
Yeah, because, okay, maybe I'm confused, we can talk later about this, but I think what I was thinking was, I understand the rationale for the ban, and what we're doing is actually just funding the feasibility and the design phase. And then at some point, there will be a vote for,
Construction
dollars.
and exclusion.
let's just say it's $1.5 million for the roof, and that would be debt excluded, and then that fully bonded piece, the bans would disappear. But I was under the impression that we had to, as part of our application to SBA, provide a fully funded mechanism, not for the design, but for the whole project. Maybe I misunderstood.
Well, I mean, if SBA, says, yep, we'll accept your statement, or we'll fund your repair, as I understand, the community has a short time
Very
frame
short.
to come up with its share. So if we put this off, if they, I guess Scott Morrison will know more about, what's the normal time frame, when do they normally, issue funding decisions, and how long do they give you?
I
And
don't
if
think
the-
next May works. It would likely have to be something sooner than that.
That's what, yeah.
And then we might have to pull
May
off a
have
special.
to
But I don't
have
know.
a fall
Is
special.
there something we could do
I don't
now?
know how to
see
move
anything
forward
out
without
of
the
it,
number,
so.
because they themselves have only given us the amount for the band.
Yeah, but, so, if they make the, the decision to fund this roof.
In August.
I don't,
I think it's December that they make their choices.
and if they give you 6 months to come up with your share, and that 6 months falls within our next, May town meeting and town election, great. But, if it doesn't, then, we would have to have a special town meeting and
Yeah, and a
a.
special
Like a spring
election.
special, yeah, we'll double check the
Okay.
timelines. And
Okay.
get back to you.
Thank you.
And that concludes everything. So, we're pretty close, really in the home stretch here. Yeah, it's a long process. So, any questions?
Mr. Chairman, I move that we close the annual town meeting warrant.
Second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Okay, it's closed. All right, thanks, Jim.
Thank you.
Next week, we're gonna review the schedule for meetings till the end of summer, I guess, right?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So Jackie and I were running through the calendar. And a thank you to Jackie for putting this together. Some of the things we're trying to take into consideration, this time of year in particular, we have a tendency to lock in on May 14th, and then the world as it exists after that date. We don't, it's easy to fall into the trap of not giving much thought to, so we wanted to kind of lay out a summer schedule. It's my understanding it's typical to, for the sake of everybody's sanity, to pull back to once a month. The other piece is we wanted to have a conversation now regarding a special town meeting. We've had some early conversations with Town Clerk Twist about the possibility of a special town meeting and how it would interact with fall presidential, and effectively just a chaotic situation that she would prefer to avoid, and I'm in full agreement. So it's our goal to not have a special. Obviously, if something pops up where you have to, but we wanted the board's feedback on that and this proposed schedule to see if there's anything that
If we-
jumps out.
If we can forego one, just in light of the fact that it is a presidential election year, number one. Number two, poor thing's got a recount on our shoulders now. If we can avoid it, fine.
Yeah.
Do I really think that we're going to be able to? Possibly. Possibly.
Is the reason for waiting 3 weeks till April 9th, is that to have it after the April 4th joint meeting? Is that the thought process of why we're meeting on April 9th instead of the 2nd?
So we had determined the April dates, April 9th and 23rd, back in September when we did the schedule through the end of June. So I think part of it was that we would have meeting fatigue because we do have tonight, the 19th, and then we're seeing you next week on the 28th at the Flint Public Library for the budget hearing and the hearing on the warrant. And then we have a placeholder meeting the following Thursday on April 4th with the FinCom in case we needed to take any last minute votes. And then this would set us up for April 9th. So I think partially it was meeting fatigue. It also was just to space out April, because if we did the the second, thank you, whoever has that date, and the teen of April, maybe the 16th off the top of my head, we would then have a very long gap until the May 7th meeting too. So we were trying to space out a little bit, I think, at the time.
And we already have
I don't have
things
April.
scheduled for the 9th.
Yeah, actually, what's the date that we mentioned for the,
Regionalization,
well, no, yeah, the regionalization, but also we specifically told the,
Winter Hill Brewing,
thank you.
we have them coming back the 9th.
Folks,
So we do have some folks scheduled for the 9th as well.
all right.
And I will say that I did, when I selected June and July, June 11th is critical because it gives us a little bit of time after town meeting to regroup. And then July 9th was selected because first off, there's the 4th of July holiday, which a lot of people go out of town for. And also, if we wait too late in July, it makes it harder. So July 9th is kind of primed for closing our books.
Yeah.
And any reserve fund transfers or last minute transfers that this board may need to take action on.
Okay. All right, that'll be our schedule.
Yep, I agree with all of it.
And I would just remind the board, just so it's out of my brain and into everybody else's too, once we are through the annual town election, this board will also need to reappoint a signatory for the summer months, for those to sign accounts payable and payroll when we don't have meetings or meetings are off cycle because of the summer schedule. So we will do that after the election.
If I may, the April meetings are off cycle for the warrant, so we would need to make sure that we have a signatory for those meetings as well.
Thanks, Sarah. We do have Costa and Rick as current signatories. They voted for the
Perfect.
year.
And we make that change based on election cycle, right?
Correct.
Okay.
But it's a good point that Sarah reminds me of and is very diligent about making sure that we are signed, sealed, delivered.
Paying our bills.
Okay, we'll move on. We have a proposal from Scott Cameron from Moore and Cameron Group for the some engineering on the Locust Street parcel.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is another one that slipped in late, so it's, should be updated in your packet, but it's basically broken down into three components: the cost of attendance at meetings, and then the two larger pieces of the development of concept one, which would be the by right concept that we had discussed. If they were to lay out housing on it as it's currently zoned. The development concept two would be a concept plan for 10,000 to 15,000 square foot smaller lots. You know, the Brigadoon style concept, and to see, you know, how many dwellings you realistically could fit on that parcel. So between those three components, the total is $9,200, which would fit within the budget. I did ask Scott to come back with an additional fee, if the board is interested upon receiving concept one and two for a land survey and wetland delineation. But what they do there is a little bit dependent on what direction you want to go for the first piece, so. Is there any conversation about this, or I wanted to get your blessing before we just said to go ahead and do it?
to do smaller lots would require
Zoning.
a variance. I'm sort of leery of, asking people to do that. So I'm more interested in a by right plan. And if we are, interested in having lower priced homes, more affordable homes, in our RFP, we can say, right, if you're interested, be 12 lots, let's say, build 12 smaller houses that you could be sold at a designated price point. Yes, that limits what we get for the land, limits the future tax revenue, but it provides a housing at a lower price point than new housing would generally be. So,
But you could, if you did the small lots, you could accommodate twice as many people,
that is true, but then you are.
or families,
Yeah.
actually, which is the goal.
Yeah, you need that zoning change.
Right.
Which comes at least.
Variance or zoning change.
Yeah,
Right.
and every time I have talked about, selling that land is, we're gonna do what, we're gonna sell it for what is currently zoned.
Okay.
So I think there is an expectation, for people in that neighborhood that about that, and which also then makes it harder for a zoning change that increases density is hard to begin with,
Yes,
no matter
yeah.
what the circumstances.
So I don't disagree. I think I would like to understand, though, if a density change happened there, i.e. lot size, what would we be looking at for? And I think that would be a helpful tool to have if that's the route that this board would like to bring to town meeting of, you know, a density change would now mean, instead of 14 lots, 28 lots or 20 lots. You know, I think we were all.
Doing a plan and evaluating, I don't have that, more information is always better than
Better.
less information,
Yep,
so.
okay.
So,
If you feel it's a dead end,
I'm more hopeful of, the by right plan, but, if people are interested in sort of the slightly more dense plan, I'm willing, to spend that part of the 9,200 that gets you that, I mean.
So I'd say that the density in the general area down there has changed from when this property was first acquired. So there's been the condos and townhomes that have been built down there. I'm trying to remember if what was built or planned at the time.
Well, I think Town Road was about that same time.
But I'm thinking more,
Down
yeah,
Locust.
more down Locust.
Ironwood wasn't there.
Yeah,
when we
Ironwood
bought-
wasn't there, both the low and higher rise. The condos and townhomes that were there,
Country Club Lane,
Yep.
None of
which is a
those.
lot more dense than what this property is today. So it's not like if, and, I mean, I don't even know if I would want to change the density until I see what the opportunity is in terms of the number of lots and/or units. But I think it's not like we're trying to make a spot change in one small little area. It's actually kind of continuing the area. And I think there's kind of a rationale for why Ironwood and others were built. I mean, it's right off the roadway. It's, to your point earlier, Jeff, if there's going to be any type of public transportation, at some point, it's probably going to be a bus to the North Shore Community College
Yeah.
campus that's there.
And, the Ironwood and the Ferncroft development, they were all in the IH district that specified, had a number of residential units, so you could build as long as there were units available within that cap.
do you have, Rick or Deb, any thoughts on, do we bother with trying to design some smaller lots or not bother?
How much would it reduce the overall, the proposal cost?
Was it $3,000 difference or something?
So by right is 3,000, the small lot concept is 5,000.
So it's almost half the proposal.
I'm not
Oh, I didn't see it,
opposed
thanks, I didn't see that page.
to trying concept two for the small lot. I'm not opposed to.
Well, I think it would be helpful not just to understand the numbers, then we can work
To see
as we
what-
get to the appraisal of, if this was appraised as by right, X number of units,
Right, if we
this
have
is what we
nothing
think
to
it is.
compare it
If
to.
it's, and we may decide in the RFP to Costa's point to say it's by right, build what you want there, this could be another 1.5, $1.7 million homes that are built there. Or it could be by right, but we want to see homes that are this size and this range of affordability, but also at the same time, we may look at it and say, there's a lot more ability to raise the number of affordable, lowercase a, options in town, and instead of having 12, 14 lots, we could have 20 or 24 lots, and then look at what would be the value to the town, both short-term on the sale of the property, longer-term on tax revenue. So I think the
That's why-
$5,000 investment gives us a much bigger aperture view of that.
But the purpose of the smaller lots wouldn't be to maximize the value of the land, or maybe that would happen, it would be lucky, or to maximize, it would be to provide a community need.
No, I think this is twofold. A, it's the community need. If we're going to go smaller lots, it's not for more value
Right.
or revenue, but I think it would be helpful to see what would the revenue difference be, both
Right.
on potential sale price. So when the appraiser looks at this and says, okay, by right, 1 acre lots, this is what those are going for, raw land would be this, boom. Potential zoning change, denser, 25,000 square foot lots, 20,000 square foot lots, this is what value would look like. And then we have the ability to start making decisions around affordability.
Yes.
Because the last thing we want is,
I mean, that was the purpose and what we were
right.
trying to achieve up there.
Yeah. with
$2
the-
million.
Exactly, right,
Exactly.
No,
right.
no, not
Okay,
at
so why
all.
don't
I'm
we?
in agreement with that.
Yeah, so it seems like the consensus is to go with the study and see what we find out. Is there a timeline?
On this piece, what do we know, March? So I'd say your second meeting, we could bring
Okay.
something back.
And then from there, once we look at that, then the appraiser will actually do his magic, or their magic,
So-
on appraising based on the parameters.
So they're on hold right now, basically?
Step between this and that, though, and that's to do the wetland delineation, some
Delineation.
soil work, because, I mean, they might get out there and say like, oh geez, half of this
So we-
is swamp.
And that may answer our dilemma on concept 1 and 2,
Oh, yeah,
because
yeah.
once the wetland delineation is done, we may find out that, guess what? We really only have 12 lots up there. We might as well keep them at the highest and best use for the town of Middleton today, instead of doing what we're trying to achieve and putting smaller lots, affordable house, or more affordable housing up there. But the wetland delineation may come right back at
That's
us
not
and
part of
say,
the
no,
proposal.
you
we
only
need-
have
It'd be
12.
additional scope, so that would partly be dictated by what comes of this. And obviously, I will say that, the town bought that site and did early engineering on it back when you bought it, and those things don't tend to shift drastically, but they do shift. So it's worth looking at.
And more work was done on the site when it was being considered for school. So, I don't know, somewhere in their records.
So do you want him to
Reason,
use that delineation?
No, I would,
No,
I would
I would say it's out of
reflag
date.
it.
At this point, it's out of date. So, the way, wetlands have been trying to shift.
So that would be the first step that he would do. There's no sense designing something,
development
that has to be
around
done
it. Don't
first.
change it.
This was the order that he recommended. I don't know if it's just at this point, if he can mock it out based off of, GIS maps and putting on a wetland overlay, but then he wants to go out and definitively actually go out and look at it, because those are kind of best guesses.
Yeah, he's going to GIS flag it, and then he'll go out and physically walk it,
Yeah,
and at the
that's-
same time, walk and look at topography. and all.
That's what he said last
We should
week,
have from the
exactly the
school
process.
Proposal.
Full data that he can build
All
off of.
topography of that, was all, was
There were
done.
two things. You mentioned the wetland delineation, I think, you mentioned something else too.
Land survey,
Oh, okay.
yeah,
Just to get our
get our bearings.
boundaries.
and, yeah.
That should be done. I mean, the boundaries haven't changed, because we needed to do that for both the acquisition of the property, but also the
So would that need to
project.
be done again or not?
Survey.
It depends what we can find. I mean, your boundaries aren't gonna change,
Right.
but you are, I mean, they'll go out and flag it and tie off ribbons and things like that. That might be helpful when the time comes for people to kick
We'll
the
find
tires
the
on
pin
the
and
parcel.
points.
No,
But a full survey is a lot,
not cheap.
it's more than this, than this proposal, I'll tell you that.
So let's see what he says, and then once you have a number, we can debate the merit then.
So we're not gonna vote on anything right now until we get those other pieces of the puzzle, right?
Just give him the go-ahead.
No, I think
If
we
you're
need to
good to
take,
go with this, just a concept,
So we would do this with or without the wetland flagging or
I would-
survey?
I would
Either way, we
recommend
would do
Yep.
this.
Mr. Chairman, I move that we approve the funding and the town administrator entering into an agreement for services for the Lowell Street parcel for the engineering proposal as provided in our packet.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Before we go into updates and announcements, there was something I meant to ask you, Justin, in your report. Is there an update on the town planner search? Has the ZBA and the planning board picked their representatives, and did we get some applications?
So they have appointed the representatives. We've received a couple applications. Have you seen anything come in beyond that?
2 or 3. The
So,
deadline's tomorrow, so we probably will see some activity.
yep.
And who are those representatives, if you know offhand, from the planning board and ZBA?
I do. So Debbie Carboni, obviously from this
We know
body.
that, yeah.
Anthony DiGregorio from the planning board, and Carolyn McPherson from the zoning board of appeals.
Okay.
I
Good group.
did send Brian a message on Friday, an email,
Oh, Brian
but
from
I
the planning
haven't
board.
heard back from him. Maybe I'll reach
About
out
that?
again. What was that?
About the person from the planning board.
Just to let him know that I've been sworn in, that's all.
Oh, okay.
So
Okay,
we'll
thanks.
we'll see where it
That
goes.
was just a
Yeah.
question I had.
No,
Any
thanks.
updates or announcements from any board members?
Yeah, I just wanted to touch again on Justin's opening remarks and behalf of the board, behalf of the town, thank Middleton Police Officer Tom McParlin for his years of service. I wish I knew the exact number, but personally, I worked with Tom throughout his our law enforcement careers, going all the way back to Lawrence and Salem jails, then to Middleton Jail, and of course, Middleton Police Department. Not only was he a longtime DARE officer for the schools in town, he was a real good cop to have around when things get squirrely in that job. So he'll be missed.
It is 30 years.
And he follows his recent retirement from his mother, and I just want to congratulate him on behalf of the town and say thank you, Tom McParlin.
Thanks to him, yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, it looks like we're gonna go into executive session. Somebody wanna make a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that we enter executive session for Mass General Law, for pursuant to Mass General Law, Chapter 30A, Section 21A3, to discuss strategy respective to collective bargaining negotiations, which is all bargaining units. Also, enter executive session pursuant to General Law, Chapter 30A, Section 21A2, to conduct a strategy session in preparation for negotiation with non-union personnel, or to conduct collective bargaining sessions or contract with non-union personnel. And then lastly, General Law, Chapter 30A, Section 21A6, to also consider the purchase, exchange, lease, or value of real property if the chair declares that an open meeting has deemed to be detrimental effect on the negotiation position. And that is pursuant to 49 South Main Street, 1018 Boston Street, and not to return to open session.
Second.
Rick, do you wanna take a roll call?
Certainly, Mr. Chairman. Deb?
Yes.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
Costa?
Yes.
And Brian?
That's a yes.
And myself, yes.
Okay, we're adjourned to executive session.